Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We had yet again another snow day for February 19th, that Friday there. So what I'm going to do again is kind of do a quick mini lesson so you're able to continue on with the ALEKS assignments and hopefully have a chance to complete those, get yourself some points and minutes for everything. So please make sure that you have something out to write on. You're taking notes throughout this lesson. It's very similar to the lesson that I created for you yesterday with the other snow day. That's going to allow you to understand the multiplication property of equality, dealing with some fractions and whole numbers and things like that. So give me a second here. I'm going to share my screen and you'll see that Thursday, we did multiplication property equalities with fractions. Today, we're going to continue with that, except we're going to look at whole numbers. And the process is very, very similar. Okay, so in fact, as I pull up my camera here, you'll see that we're going to start with a quick review of what we learned in the last video. If I have 2/3 x equals 18, right, I'm trying to solve for x. I want to get that number or that variable, by itself. And my process here, I wrote off to the side, I need to multiply by the reciprocal because as we talked about earlier on, that's going to get that x by itself because any number multiplied by its reciprocal will just be 1. And then we're going to cross simplify and hopefully get to a whole number for our answer, right? So in this case, what we talked about in the previous video, I would multiply both sides by 3/2, right? My original fraction is 2/3. My reciprocal is 3/2. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply both sides by that reciprocal. I notice, and I kind of already did it there, that these are going to cancel my numerators and denominators in each of those. I'm left with x. And then as we said previously as well, we can think of 18 as 18/1. Well, the 1 and the 3 aren't going to simplify at all, but the 18 is going to simplify with the 2 because 2 goes into 18 9 times. I have a 1 left over. So I can think about this as 9/1 times 3/1, or just 9 times 3, which will give me 27. That is what we accomplished with the multiplication property of equality dealing with fractions, and we were getting whole number answers, okay? What we want to think about today is, well, what if it's a situation where I cross simplify and multiply by the reciprocal, and my answer is not a whole number, right? I don't get that nice even number at the end. One thing we want to keep in mind, and we're going to start with an example here, is that multiplying by the reciprocal is the same thing as dividing by maybe that whole fraction or a whole number. So for example, I might have a case where I have 20x is equal to 5. And you're saying to yourself, okay, well, 20 is not a fraction. It's not something that I've dealt with before. Well, that note that I just kind of made there verbally is that I can multiply this, and I'll show it both ways here. I can multiply this by the reciprocal to start. Remember, 20 or any whole number is just 20/1. Any whole number is that number over 1. I can multiply this by 1/20. And continue to cross simplify as I have done before. The only difference is, notice that a lot of times I would have 1 left over in my denominator. In this case, I can think of this as 1/20 times 5/1. Those 1s will continue to be 1s, but now my number for 1 is going to be in my numerator, and my denominator will simplify to 4. So I have 1/1 times 1/4. Well, that's just going to leave me with x equals 1/4 as my answer. So when I simplify now, I'm going to get a number in my denominator rather than in my numerator that's going to help me simplify. And I'm going to be left with answers that are actually fractions. Now, another way that we can think about doing this, instead of multiplying by 1/20, we can also think about this as dividing both sides by just 20. So that was that point I made earlier. Multiplying by the reciprocal is the same thing as dividing by that number. Well, 20 divided by 20, that's still going to leave me with that x And now what I can do is think about just simplifying this fraction as much as I can. Notice that a number that goes into each of those is 5. 5 goes into 5 once, 5 goes into 24 times, and I'm still left with x equals 1/4. So either way that you accomplish the work for this, you will still get the same answer. Okay. We're going to take a look at another example. And this time we're going to have 14x is equal to 8. Okay. 14x is equal to 8. And again, I'm going to show this both ways. But this time I want to start with maybe the division one. Okay. So 14x equals 8. I can divide both sides by 14. I know 14 divided by 14 is going to leave me with an x, right? Because it's just 1. 8 over 14. I need to think about a number I can divide both of those by evenly. Notice that 2 goes into 8 4 times, and 2 goes into 14, 7 times, right? So I can think about taking each of these, dividing them by 2, and this becomes my simplified fraction. Sometimes you might pick a number and you might have to simplify further, right? And that's okay. So long as you continue to simplify and get to a fraction that can't be simplified further, then you are good. All right. Another way that we can think about this, and we should get 4 over 7 as our answer, is to multiply both sides by 1 over 14, that reciprocal. Remember that these will cancel. I'm still going to be left with x. And then I would still continue to simplify. Well, I know that 2 goes into 8 4 times. 2 goes into 14 7 times. I would have 4 over 1 times 1 over 7. I can multiply right across and get 4 over 7. Remember that when we're multiplying fractions, it's not like addition or subtraction. We don't need common denominators. We can just move right across in order to complete that task. Okay. So just to kind of recap, you can either multiply by the reciprocal or divide by that number. Either way, you want to think to yourself, how can I get my variable by itself? Well, it's either of those options. And then how can I simplify further, right? We don't want to leave our answer as x equals 5 over 20 or x equals 18 over 14. We need to think about a number that goes into each, the numerator and the denominator evenly, and it has to be the most simplified fraction for our answer. Okay. With this being completed now, you will be able to complete the ALEKS homework assignment that is in ALEKS for today, in that program for today, on multiplication property of equality with whole numbers.